And welcome to another episode of Growing Pains, where we talk to entrepreneurs and founders about the growing pains that come with funding generally and the transitions that come out of that, both from venture and PE, but also about the personal growth that we have to encounter as we do those transitions. So I'm joined today, very honored to be joined today by David Hornik, who is a legend in Silicon Valley for his investment prowess. He has the golden touch as determined by Deloitte and proven by his success. He's had at least four, maybe five, $10 billion exits in his picks, and some misses, some of
Yeah,
which are
a few.
legendary. But you know what? There's another $10 billion bust coming up any day, so you never know.
That's the
And
hope.
has helped so many entrepreneurs in so many ways, and the art community in the Valley especially, and lectures at Harvard and Stanford. David comes from a law background, was Jerry Yang's lawyer. I guess that got you into Yahoo. How did that
Long
happen?
ago. Well, so it turns out Jerry and I were in the same freshman dorm and friends when we were 18.
Okay.
And so the early Yahoo team were a bunch of friends from the dorm. They started this company, Jerry and Dave Philo, who was his kind of partner in crime in his graduate studies. And so I had been an attorney for some period of time and was deciding what to do next and decided to move back to Silicon Valley and represent startups in no small part because Yahoo was doing amazing stuff and I had the opportunity to join the law firm that represented Yahoo. And so I was working, the very first thing I worked on was an acquisition that Yahoo made of Paul Graham's company before Y Combinator. So,
Wow.
yeah, so kind of a crazy history.
All right. So that network gives you access to deals, which allows you to make these choices. And sometimes you do go for them and sometimes you don't. I mean, the legendary one and I'm sorry, I don't want to talk about deals too much, but
Fine.
you've made some awesome picks with Splunk sort of being a game changer for you, and then missed on Uber because I guess black cars wasn't a big enough market. I mean,
Yeah.
TAM is obviously a question that comes up, and those guys were not small thinkers. So how did they not tell you that they were going to go in a bowling pin to other market to growing the company? I
I
would
don't
I would put
honestly
that on
think.
them more than you, really.
Well, look, I don't think that that was what the focus was at the time. Obviously, as you
Right.
say, Travis, I had backed Travis's previous company, a company called Red Swoosh, and had worked with him closely. He and I were friends. And we were talking about Uber, and Uber was building an interesting business, but their early business was just limousines on demand. It was black
Right.
cars, and for very good reason, right? They could, because black cars had licenses, they could call them and they could come to you and avoided a bunch of the regulatory things that end up being a giant issue for Uber that
Right.
obviously they overcame over time. But
Right.
they did not have UberX at the time. They were really just focused on growing this experience they had. Obviously the key is to invest where the puck is going, not where the puck
Yeah.
is. But
Good Canadian expression.
sometimes you miss it. And in that instance,
Yeah.
we just we missed it. And frankly, it was a little while before Uber kind of jumped on the UberX wagon. And that was really after Lyft had come up with the model. And they said, oh, wait a second, that is a good model. Maybe we should chase that. And they were off to the races. So sometimes you get it right and see some big opportunity in the future. And sometimes you look at it and say, well, hard to know. I mean, when you consider that my year is looking at 1,000 companies and funding one, the likelihood
Yeah.
that one of the other 999 was probably a good idea is not small.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, and you've got the magic touch. I mean, you're not a technical guy. You're a lawyer. I mean, you love technology, and you obviously have an emotional IQ that is probably pretty off the charts in terms of seeing something in somebody that is different, and that is something that you want to write. I mean, most people at Series A, they've got product market fit. They're getting to sort of the growth mode, and are you still betting the jockey as much as the business?
For
And
sure. For sure.
yeah,
I
okay.
mean, if you think about it, we tend to invest when there is some we call product market fit, right? You've shown you're backing someone who's
People are
solving a
buying it.
problem, and you say like, okay, what is this problem? They describe some real problem, and then you say, great, who has the problem and do we have any evidence they have this problem, right? And
Yeah.
so they'll say, yeah, I've got these customers or these people using the thing or whatever. And it's very early. I'm doing that when you have a few customers, right? I funded this amazing company called Bill.com. And the idea was, wouldn't it be great for small businesses to be able to pay bills online where consumers can, write digital checks, but businesses still don't have a good solution. But at the time, they only had, a handful of companies that were using the solution, but it just made a ton of sense. And so it was like, okay,
Right.
great. I knew the CEO. I knew he was a force. I was excited to back him. I've been on that board
This
for
is your second
15
time backing him,
years.
though, right?
Yeah, I had backed him. His
Yeah.
very first company. That was a great example of a guy. He pitched 90 something VCs before he got a term sheet. 90 people were like, no, I'm not going to give you money. For some reason, I said, you know what? I think this is a great guy. He's trying to create an online payroll business that I think makes a bunch of sense. And it did. Intuit bought that company. It is Intuit's online payroll business. And then he started the next one. I said, great, let's do this again. And the second one was dramatically bigger. It was, a gigantic, became a public company. And now, billions of dollars are paid by small businesses using Bill.com, which is amazing.
Sure. But that's not a good example. The reason I bring that up, it's not necessarily the best example because it's your second bet on the guy. And the funny story is you didn't know that he'd had 100 rejections from everybody else
No, no,
when
I
you
did
bet
not.
on him. So what was the thing about him that put you over the fence? And was that not your first deal as
That
well?
was my very first deal. So I've
Okay, so
funded,
big risk, right? Your
yeah,
reputation is on the line. You got a
yeah.
guy who's never built a company before.
Yeah,
Everyone's
it's a
turned him
tricky
down.
question, right? Since that time, I've backed, 45 companies, 50 companies. So I've backed 100 founders who are building things. All founders are different, but what
They
you
are.
find is that that they really care about the problem they're solving. Like they have some big issue where they're like, oh, I can't believe that the world is like this.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
world should not be like this. And if we win, if we can manage to do this thing, the world will not be like this anymore. And the this is so broad, right? It's Renee saying, why is it that small business owners have to call you up to do payroll? Why shouldn't they be able to do that at 1 a.m. when they're like losing
Sleeping.
sleep about their business, right? And Splunk was, hey, we've run a bunch of big systems, and when the system goes down, it's really hard to figure out what's broken. Wouldn't it be better if you could just Google the problem on your log files? And turned out that was an epically good idea, right? And, so in every instance, someone comes to you and they say, like, there's this problem that exists and it's bothering me for this reason. And usually it's because they've experienced it in some capacity or other. And so I want to solve it. And then you say, okay, why would you solve it? Right. And sometimes the answer is you would not be the right person to solve it. So even though it's a kind of
Right.
interesting problem, you're not the right person.
Not the right guy. Yeah.
Sometimes you're a great person. The problem you're solving is profoundly uninteresting. You're like, oh, that's not that interesting. Like, I don't know. And stupidly sometimes, as you say, with Uber, he's like, oh, Travis and Garrett were great entrepreneurs. They for sure could solve problems. And their problem they were right about, which is it's so silly that you can't just pull out your phone and say, "Hey, come to me." What I misunderstood was that they were solving a giant problem. That ultimately these things would expand dramatically, and it would be me this morning getting into Boston Logan Airport and saying, "I need to get to the hotel. What's the best way to do it?" Right?
Exactly.
There are lots of reasons why you don't get to the conclusion that this is an interesting problem or a big problem and this is the right person to solve it. But the people I back are the people where you're like, these are people I like. I
Yeah.
want to work with them. I think
Yeah.
that they'll be able to convince other great people to join them in this quest to build
Yeah.
something amazing. And if they build it, it actually has a capacity to really change the planet in some interesting way. And
Yeah.
of course, as an investor, the goal is to turn money into more money. But my focus is not on that. My focus is on if you solve a big, interesting problem, the byproduct of that is that we will make money. But the primary issue is, are you someone amazing that I want to spend the next 10, 15 years hanging out with, solving some big, interesting problem that makes people's lives better?
That's great. And knowing somebody's in for the long haul, not for a quick turn, is very comforting for an entrepreneur. So, David, let's go. Those are deals that were done in the growth of SaaS businesses, the growth of cloud, the growth of, I would describe that as fundamentally a different era to one we're in today. And the one we're in
Hmm.
today is even more complicated by the potential issues with trade barriers and everything else like that. But without getting into that, we're in a market where, in those times, your engineering team was potentially your moat, your technology was your moat, and you could defend yourself around potentially IP, but certainly speed to market was very important in those growth markets. Today, it's just lightning fast, and you almost don't have any more technology moat because everything can be rebuilt or re-engineered so fast. So how are you managing that in your investment thesis and in your bets? And am I wrong in that assumption?
Yeah, I don't know that I see it that way. I mean, I think there's always where you're always when the internet emerged, then every company tried to reinvent itself as an internet enabled business. And it was like, okay, and it was moving unimaginably quickly. And some of those ended up being fundamentally different businesses, transformational businesses like an Amazon. And then big data showed up and it was like, oh, data enables companies in a way that it never has before. And suddenly everybody rewrote the platforms with big data. And some of those ended up being fundamentally giant and interesting businesses. And so
Hmm.
now we're in the AI version of this, where everybody's going to rewrite their platforms to be AI enabled. And there will be these platforms that are fundamentally different and transformative, and not just the, okay, OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever are going to be the fundamental underlying AI, in particular because they're being chased very quickly by gigantic companies and an open source model that is going to be
Right.
profound,
Yeah.
right? But then those models are going to be applied to business problems in ways that are going to create huge businesses and giant value. And they will be differentiated by tech. They will be differentiated. In this instance, they'll be differentiated by data, right? Access to data, underlying data, the capacity to integrate with not only the broader universe of information, but also the specific information that you have either as a consumer or as an enterprise. And that capacity to bridge specific data in a very clear vertical in ways that enable differentiated experiences will be the things that emerge and are this next wave of huge transformative businesses. And they will be differentiated and they will be defensible and they will be technically interesting, not just the first to market. So I don't know what those are going to be yet, but that's what I'm looking for. Those are the companies I'm trying to fund.
Okay. So you know what, and I'm just riffing here, but
Yeah.
that statement, which is actually absolutely very true, in my opinion. I'm in a PE conference right now, DealMax. It's all the mid-market PE firms are here, and they're betting on mid-market companies, and they're sort of like VCs in the evolution cycle, got them to the next level and exit through
Hmm.
that way, or strategics. It would seem to me that the industries that have tons of data and aren't leveraging it yet are exactly those that you need to put the wrapper of these technologies around, so the wrapper actually has something that is uniquely defendable so that it can be successful. That is that kind of, and I know you're not someone who goes on a thesis, you go more on the opportunities that are presented. But is that something that would be directionally where you'd go, or it's a safer bet, or
Well,
how
look,
do you feel about
first of all,
that?
there is no safer bet.
Yeah.
My job is not about the safer bet. Um, I backed this fantastic company called Pharos AI,
Okay.
Farosa. The team were the folks who had built Einstein at Salesforce, their original
Okay.
AI platform.
Okay.
And they said, every company now has these giant teams of developers who are trying to solve problems within the enterprise. But there's no good way to measure and manage those folks to understand, who are the actually effective coders? How are we getting code to transform our businesses? How are we measuring it? Blah, blah, blah. And so they've built this platform that allows you to integrate all of the inputs from your enterprise and
Hmm?
then measure and value the things that your engineering teams are doing to figure out, are you doing the right things? Are there particular ways in which you're injecting errors into code? Is the code moving your business forward, etc.? Which was already profoundly valuable for teams that were trying to have hundreds and thousands of engineers create real value. Then comes along all these co-pilots, and suddenly
Hmm.
all your engineering teams are saying like, oh, we can, this is multiplicative, and we can create more code, and we can be more efficient, we can have fewer engineers, etc. And there is no good way for teams to say, is that actually working? Like, is that actually helping? I know
Hmm.
a very large organization that went through and said, to what extent are these tools actually increasing our productivity? And they did some very, very hard, heavy lifting without Pharos just to come to the conclusion that maybe they were getting 10% gain from the co-pilots they were using. And when there are others who are saying, oh, we can get rid of our entire engineering team. And so
Right.
by having the capacity with a Pharos to integrate with all of the systems and your engineers, you know, in the Git and the check-ins and the whatever, and measure the efficacy of the code, and then measure the efficacy of these co-pilots, suddenly you have a tool that'll allow you to actually determine if AI is making you better. Is it making your
That's
code
cool.
better? Is it making it more efficient? Are you saving money or time? Is the velocity faster? All these things that are profoundly important in the current AI. But if you didn't have this broad platform, you had no idea. So I funded the company before co-pilots were the key
Wow.
driver, but
Yeah.
they were in the best position to then determine whether that was an effective solution for your company. So there are always going to be technologies that are helping solve big problems, and then they're going to adapt to the things that come before it.
Right. Right. That's interesting. A little pitch here. So I build 4 tech companies, and I hated outsourcing. It's a shit show. It's always, who are you gonna get? It's like the box of chocolates in Forrest Gump, and it's too late by the time you're choosing it because you already selected a company. So I built a massive database on who's good at what, and I do a matching service to help them get to a short list on based on thousands that are based on a criteria fitting the need. But it's really mostly on the people that are available from that agency that is well suited at the time.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
interesting.
and
I
look,
get asked a lot.
AI is not going to get AI is going to not going to change that. In some ways, that database will be more valuable once you understand how these folks that you've characterized then put AI to work to make themselves more efficient or less efficient, et cetera. Right. So
Exactly right.
these AI is an accelerant, but it is
Yeah.
not. It is not a solution, and so it will be interesting to see how that plays itself out.
Yeah, I know. I've asked a lot of CTOs what they're thinking about, and the question is this business going to diminish over time? And what'll happen is that the rates may increase because the efficiency of each of these agencies is increasing and they're leveraging AI and they have the domain expertise, et cetera. But, um, and I've asked CTOs, so what's your headcount in your engineering department since you've got Copilot? And they said the biggest problem is going to be the junior engineers aren't going to rise through the ranks because they're not going to hire any junior engineers. And that's going to be a problem in the long term for the industry at large.
Yeah, well,
But they
this is
said one,
across every industry, right? I was a
yeah,
lawyer, and you go to a law firm, and you're a junior associate, and then you're a senior associate, and then you're a
yeah,
partner. And along the way, you learn from more senior attorneys what it is to be an attorney. And if junior
right,
associates are going to be replaced with, AI, then how does anyone get trained to be a senior associate and a partner, right? It's a
exactly.
very big problem.
Yeah. But it seems there's still lots of lawyers around.
Yeah,
Didn't like
well,
everybody.
not going anywhere soon.
So by the way, the conclusion one of these guys said is I'd be happy to get paid $450 an hour to correct somebody's vibe.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Vibe code away. I'll fix it.
So going back to, you've got an incredible agenda. I mean, let's talk about your conference a bit. It's a non-conference conference. Can you just describe it a little bit for our audience so that I
Yeah,
don't blow
sure.
that?
Yeah. I went to a bunch of conferences and I enjoyed them, right? Right now, the TED conference is this week. I went to the TED conference for 2 decades. And they're amazing speakers telling you all sorts of interesting things. But I was not there to hear the speakers. I was there to meet the other amazing people who were there to see the speakers. And so
Right.
I
Right.
stopped going in and I spent all my time in the lobby. And whoever came out to the lobby, I'd talk with them and say, like, hey, Sean, what have you been up to? It's great to see you. We have this great conversation. Then you'd go back in and someone else would come out and I'd talk with them. And eventually I said, really would be better if a conference was just about these conversations, right? We don't need speakers. We don't need panels. And ideally, everybody who came to the conference would have been a speaker at any other conference so that everybody you're talking to is this high level, interesting individual. So I created the lobby. It's an invite only event. Everybody goes to Hawaii because it's lovely and relaxed and they let down their defenses and we talk to each other about the stuff that's important at that time. And sometimes that's, okay, how are LLMs changing how we think about the development process, right? But
Right.
sometimes it is, how are we being good parents while running big businesses, right? How are we thinking about balancing our time? Or how do you run a great board meeting as your company goes from 10 people to 1,000 people? These sorts of
Right.
topics.
Right.
And it's been great. I'm coming up on the 28th lobby conference. It's been going on for a bunch of years. Lots and lots of smart people have come through it. And it's about people, right? It's about the people part of building and funding and growing these big businesses.
And I got to say, by the way, it's called the Lobby Conference for those who don't
Right.
know. And there's one for women and there's one for underrepresented as well. So I know that's out of vogue these days
We
in the United States, but
You know what? It is. I am
huge.
undaunted. I am undaunted by this idea that we should not care about diversity, that we should not care
Yeah.
about equity. Equity
Yeah.
is equality. We don't care about equality anymore. We don't care about inclusive organizations. Like, that's just moronic. But
Yeah.
yes, I have a thing called Lobby Elevate, and I have a female founder summit, and then we have a founders of color summit that's coming up in September. And the idea is that, in fact, it's numerically proven that it is dramatically harder if you're a female founder or a founder of color to get funded.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the objective of this conference is just to give great founders feedback on the process of fundraising so that they understand what they're up against. And the goal here is in every instance to try and help amazing individuals to be the very best versions of themselves so that they can do the very best job of solving big, interesting problems.
So I'm interested, and this is all about growing pains, and as I said in the beginning, it can be emotional, and it is like I've seen this so many times when a company gets either P growth or venture growth capital, you know it's the adults start walking into the room, as they say, and things have to change from the bootstrapping entrepreneurial phase to a more enterprise kind of feel. And those are growing pains, and they come with emotional trauma, including letting go some of the people who got you to where you are, including some good life coaching to help balance your own life, which has been a disaster getting to where you're getting. What are you seeing as the themes these days, now that the speed of and expectation side of outcomes with technology companies, with co-pilots and everything else, and the changes that are so rapid in the market? Is there a theme you're seeing in these conversations that is dominating?
Well, like I said, everything old is new again, right? I mean, and
Okay.
the folks building these companies today, by and large, were not around in the late '90s when the companies building the internet were coming. But boy, oh boy, I have to tell you, that is exactly what it was like from '95 to 2000. Was this exact same, like, oh my God, you have to drop out of college immediately and build a company because the wave is here, and if you don't build it this minute, you're gonna lose
Yeah.
out. The time is
That's
now. And now we're seeing the exact same thing in AI. And oh, it's transformative and it's gonna move. And if you don't get that there now, and while that is true to a certain extent, it is also completely wrong. Like, great businesses are
okay.
not born in 2 minutes. They cannot be birthed instantaneously and grow to massive outcomes overnight. And while there will be some anomalous examples of that, the vast majority of these founders and companies will have to be thoughtful and methodical and build things that solve real problems using the technology available. And it is certainly true that the technology is evolving quickly with artificial
Hmm.
intelligence. Each of these new
Hmm.
models enables different capacity and different functionality, et cetera. But that doesn't change your business. Like, you still need to build a team. And you still, right? If you're an enterprise solution using AI, you still need to figure out, how do you sell it to enterprises? What does that sale look like? How do you support those enterprises? How do they grow? How do you integrate with things like Okta to allow it to be, secure? All these things that require thoughtful, smart people and time and focus. And
Yeah.
the idea that we're just going to like throw those things away and zoom through it, and you're just, 7 people are going to build a multi-billion-dollar business without any of that is just silly. It's not going to be true. And all you have to do is look at the scale of the big giant, foundational model companies, because it's not like they said, oh yeah, we're killing it and we don't need resources. There are
Right.
thousands of people and growing as quickly as they possibly can. And some of them will implode and some of them will be the next great businesses of our lifetimes. But business is still hard. It still takes focus. It still takes extraordinary humans at every level, right? It's not like, oh, I guess we don't need a CFO at OpenAI. No, guess what?
Yeah.
You need someone who has experience managing the economics of paying 2,000 people in
Right.
however many countries. You still need someone who is a deep product thinker to keep in check this gigantic ecosystem. So I've had the very good fortune of sitting on little company boards and watching them get big. And the evolution is an amazing one, and not a, and there's this sense of like, oh, it's so onerous and terrible and blah blah blah, and people get fired, whatever. No, it's extraordinary. Amazing people get responsibility to do things they couldn't have done before. They grow to the occasion. They build astonishing businesses. And that's the history of Silicon Valley. That's the history of the startup world. And there is nothing new about this phase that we're seeing.
Interesting. One of my first companies, they build this technology, and it's going to solve massive problems. And there's a $250 billion industry, and it was going to blah blah blah. Getting people to adopt it was the issue, right? And one guy said business would be so easy if people weren't involved, because it would all be logic, right? And you have to understand that human side, which is, I guess, your gift is understanding the human.
Look, everybody is talking about agentic AI, right? That AI is going to engage, an agent here is going to engage with another agent, and oh, that's great. But guess what? Who makes the decision which agents are going to engage with each other, and who sets up those agents, and what do those agents do? And then hopefully someone's focused on, how do we turn off the agent when it goes rogue, and how do we secure the agent? Like, so even in this like dystopian horror show of a future that is being described where agents talk to agents or whatever, it's still ultimately going to be people who are decision makers about what agents are deployed doing.
So in the art side, you almost have a binary life, right? You have this whole business side. It's all tech. It's all about, but and there's a human side to that, of course. But you also have this whole artistic side. You love music and visual arts, and are you? I'm amazed that you haven't yet found a way to bring those two together. And there's someone that must have been presenting a business where the arts and technology combine.
Yeah, I mean, I see them all the time, right? Anytime
Okay,
you are either an expert in a thing or an enthusiast in a thing, or you have experience in a thing, then you get to hear about it. So, having been an attorney, I get to hear about the tech that's trying to solve problems for attorneys. Being someone who
sure.
is a believer and a fanatic about the contemporary art, I met with Artsy and I met with all of these amazing art related businesses. My love of art is because humans are amazing, and they create things that really that speak to other humans in ways that you can't reflect in an email. Maybe you can
Right.
in a poem, maybe you can in a song, maybe you can in a painting, and every human has a different reaction. But the thing that my wife and I find profoundly compelling is this sort of artistic vision that brings around emotion and joy and all of these things. And so that's
Nice.
amazing. And we want to share that and spread that. What I don't have any interest in is the business of contemporary art. And there are lots of
Right.
people who think, oh, this is a great thing. Like, David, it must be the case that your art collection is worth more than you paid for it. And if I were to sell it, assuredly that's true. But I will
Yeah.
never sell it. I intend to
Right.
give it away to museums. I intend for it to be seen by humans who say, like, oh my God, that's beautiful and makes me think, and I love it very much, right? And so
Nice.
I have no interest in that. And I am the periodic investor, and I use that term very loosely, in Broadway shows, and it's the same thing.
Uh,
I
okay.
put money into shows that I think should be made because it would be awesome if the world got to see them. And every so often there's a show that turns out people find super compelling, right? Hadestown has been on Broadway for lots of years and has made enough money to make up for all of the other things that didn't make money, even though they were amazing, right? Shows like Slave Play, this extraordinary play, or Inheritance, or Kimberly Akimbo. These are beautiful shows that I'm grateful exist, but I wasn't investing in them because I wanted to make money. I was investing in them because money is the thing that enables them to get made, and then people can experience them. And so, in some ways, the thing that's great about the venture business is that because I've backed these astonishing companies and these incredible founders, and the byproduct of that, the fumes of that have been, economic gain, I've been able to then use that you know, to give
To
art
give
to
back into,
museums
yeah,
and to
that's
help
good.
create amazing shows on Broadway.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So let me ask, as entrepreneurs, we are also raising a family, and not just the family in the company, but the family at home. And that can obviously pose a lot of challenges. And sometimes you don't pay as much attention to the things that you should, because those are investments that grow in human capital. And you've got what, 4 kids?
For yeah.
4 kids. Okay. So I brought up three. I mean, two things can happen. They can be intimidated by the parent and say, I'm never going to be like that. And they go the opposite direction, or they're inspired by maybe your artistic side. Can you talk about what's happened with your kids and how you balance the incredible, like, we're looking at 1,000 companies, doing due diligence on them and supporting the arts and everything else you're doing. That's taxing on time at the expense of the family. How have you managed to balance how the kids responded to you being who you are?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's always a balance. If you care deeply about what you do, both in work and at home, then it will
Hmm.
always be a balancing act because I have 150% of my time taken up in both of those things. I could easily spend all of my time with my wife and 4 kids and spending time, nurturing the things that we all find amazing. And I could spend 150% of my time in my conference. I could spend 150% of my time in doing all these things. So I'm coming to you right now from a hotel in Cambridge, Mass. I'm teaching 2 classes this quarter. One is a class called Entrepreneurship Through the Lens of Venture Capital at Stanford that I had yesterday, which was it's a great fun class. We have a bunch of really smart entrepreneurs, and we talk about how VCs and entrepreneurs interact. And so we had that first class of that, but I'm teaching a class for the next 2 weeks on entrepreneurship and venture capital at Harvard Law School. And so I had to take a red eye last night in order to get here to Cambridge in time
Gosh.
that I could teach the class Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I'll fly back to the Bay Area. And then in the meantime, right before we got on the phone, one of my kids' phones had broken and he was trying to get it reconnected, and we were having issues with AT&T, which is, I'm sure, shocking to you. And so I had to say to him, like, I can't finish this problem right now because I have to go have this conversation. I'll get back to you after that and we'll get on with it. So I think life is about balancing things. 4 kids, 3 of my 4 kids are creative types. I have a composer, I have a designer,
Wow. Wow.
I have a kid who's in the fashion design space.
Okay.
All 3 of them live in Brooklyn. They're all doing not together, all doing that, living in their own separate worlds.
Wow.
My 4th kid is an admissions officer at Stanford, and so she's living in
Okay.
that world, which is interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
3 of the 4 have future spouses. 2 are engaged. The third, I hope, soon. And they're
Wow.
amazing kids who I'm
Great.
deeply connected to in their careers. The oldest, my son and his boyfriend is a journalist and doing amazing stuff. The next one, who's the designer, his girlfriend is a marketing and product guru. And the next one has a credible kid who's going to law school. Right? All of these pieces are just a part of the pie.
Yeah.
And I think all you can do is kind of be engaged and excited. And, last night while I was having dinner with my daughter and her fiance, one of the kids called to give an update on something. And he was then on speakerphone for the entire dinner as we sort of sat there eating in
As the
person with
dinner
my
with him.
wife, my daughter and fiance, and then her fiance, and then my son on speakerphone while he walked his dog and talked about the crazy stuff he had seen in the musical theater world or whatever. And that was
Wow.
great. And then I had to head to the airport because I had to fly on this red eye to get to
Wow.
come teach at Harvard, right? So, on the one hand, crazy, chaotic life. And on the other
Hmm.
hand, how lucky that you can manage to fit all these pieces together and do all of the things that you think are engaging and exciting without having to sacrifice any of the others.
Well, David, kudos to you. I mean, a rich life in the things that count, right? I mean, the love of the family and love of the arts and love of business. What a great combination. So, thank you very
Very
much for your
lucky.
time. I hope your son's phone works out. I'll let you go back to that and make some great entrepreneurs understand venture capital because it's a shit show out there sometimes, and it's good to have somebody guiding them through. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully,
Thank you so
my
much,
goal
David.
is yeah, I appreciate you having me on. My goal is to teach them all that you can be successful and still be a decent, caring human. And that's my only goal.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, kudos to you. Thank you so much, David. Have
Great
a great
talking to you.
day.